It's Tuesday, June 21st, 2016, and it's time for WorthPoint Chats with Harry Rinker. I'm Greg Watkins, the editor at WorthPoint, and here is Harry. How you doing today, Harry?
Hey, I'm great. It's a beautiful summer day, I guess. But now that we've had the summer solstice,
Officially, yes.
officially summer, beautiful summer day here in Grand Rapids. Interesting story in the Grand Rapids newspaper, which has, I don't know if it has anything to do with antiquing or not, but maybe, especially if you like antiquing in cool weather. There are 3 cities in Michigan that have never had a recorded temperature above 90 degrees.
Really?
Yeah, and they're not all up in the Upper Peninsula either. There was one in the middle of the state. It was kind of interesting. It has been. It's an interesting thing here. We don't talk about 100-degree days in Michigan, although there were some recorded over time. But a 90-degree day is a catastrophe here.
Well, considering that Palm Springs is up to 120 yesterday and 112 today,
And
I take 90 anytime.
But anyway, we've got a lot to talk about. They've been a kind of an interesting week out there. One of the major stories that broke this week was that there have been, for almost 2 years now, a lot of talk about how they're going to regulate ivory, that type of thing. And it's been a grave concern about that in the antique and collectibles trade because of the fact that, the regulations were so stringent that selling ivory is a real problem. And they've been debating it, and finally the Federal Trade Commission has come out with a ruling virtually banning state-to-state ivory sales. Now, what's interesting about this ruling, is it's banned state-to-state ivory sales. The Federal Trade Commission can do that, right?
Right.
Now, if you sell within the state, on the other hand, then that doesn't fall under the FTC ruling. Remember, the Federal Trade Commission is an interstate commerce commission, okay?
Yes.
But the deal is, as of this fall, apparently, it will be illegal to sell ivory state to state. And unless there is all kinds of paperwork that's done to prove that it was here prior to 1968. Now, this is a real problem because there's a lot of carved ivory and ivory material in the antiques and collectibles field, and it's going to become a huge issue. Now, let's deal with the first thing first, the state-to-state sales. Now, really what they're after is these people sitting at home with tusks and stuff. But, when you try to tell the feds or anybody to write an exclusionary rule that will allow the antiques and collectibles trade to function properly, it gets to be extremely difficult. This is what they want to prevent. They want to prevent this kind of stuff. But up until now, and up until, I believe, July 1, 2016, you can sell legal pre-ban ivory that was here through before June 1989. It's still a long while ago, but if you can prove it, you can still sell it until July the 1st, and then, man, that's the end of it. Now, the situation is that means, however, individual states can regulate the sale of ivory. And some states have literally banned the sale, period, no matter what, even if it's antique ivory. And this is going to be huge for antique people because how are you going to know what state it is? Now, theoretically, transporting ivory from one state to another in your car and then selling in that state is not necessarily interstate commerce, but it is if you don't live in that state. So this is going to be a real thing. Antique Week, in its June 20th issue, ran an article on this, and the editorial in Maine Antique Digest has just in the let's see here, I think it's the July Maine Antique Digest. This is written by S. Clayton Pennington, and it reads, "It isn't perfect, but the new federal rule regarding African elephant ivory should bring a sigh of relief from the antiques trade." I don't know about that. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service, which issued the final version of the rule on July 6/6, will make dealers and collectors jump through a lot of hoops, but in the current political climate, it's the best result the trade could hope for. Now notice, you got a different group here, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service versus the Federal Trade Commission. Now, the new rule, which goes into effect on July 6th, includes an exception for antiques that qualify under the Endangered Species Act. The burden will be on the seller to prove that the objects qualify, but as the rule does not require expensive forensic testing, a qualified appraisal with strict guidelines will suffice. Well, boy, oh boy, I don't want to be necessarily the appraisers that have to take that type of stuff on. Since the rule was first postponed in 2015, the United States Fish and Wildlife has received more than 1.3 million comments about this type of stuff. They believe that in terms of the Fish and Wildlife group that there is at least some structure there. But it says sales will be allowed for objects that do not qualify as Endangered Species Act antiques. That's the stuff that came in much earlier. If they have a small amount of ivory, 200 grams or less, then that makes it really easy. The United States Field and Wildlife Service is making its final rule. The battle against antique ivory prohibition should shift to the state level, where it's an uphill battle. Connecticut, however, recently rejected an ivory ban after some hard and effective lobbying by the antiques trade. And here's the issue on all these state fights. We're not organized in this trade. We are not. Dealers are not organized. There's some state dealer organizations, as you well know. But, there are going to be a lot of states where if this stuff comes up, there's not going to be a united front by the dealers in there to do this. So now what we've got to do is, if you're dealing in ivory or anything made of ivory, you now have to not only deal with the Federal Trade Commission issue of not selling the stuff state to state, but with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service rules. Now, suppose you get a federal clearance from the Fish and Wildlife Service, right? That ain't gonna hold up with the FTC if you try to sell it out of state. So I'm going to tell you right now, if you're dealing in ivory, or you're collecting ivory, or you're doing anything, I think it's time to put it aside for 6 months to a year and wait till this all settles. And I don't know if it ever will fully settle either. So it's an interesting one. Now, my opinion is this: they're both groups, the Federal Wildlife Service and the FTC, and now I'm kind of pontificating, but I'm my guru status here. But the situation is that there has to be a reasonable alternative, and if it can be proved that the ivory was in America before a certain date, and whether that date is 1950 or 1960 or 1970 or 1989, whatever that date is, once there's good, solid, valid proof, then the thing ought to be allowed to be sold across the board, whether it's in one state or another, and whatever. But are there going to be people that issue false certificates? Are there going to be all kinds of problems with the certification levels? You betcha. So I'll tell you one thing. I think I'm going to be collecting toy puzzles again, as long as they're not made out of ivory.
Right.
But think about how this spins off into a lot of key categories, like chess sets, for example. Think of how many GIs after World War II, after the Korean War, through the Asian Wars, brought back sets. Now, a lot of the times the ivory doesn't turn out to be real elephant ivory or whatever, but the truth of the matter is that a lot of them were, as some of them were, and it's going to be a problem. Well, enough of that silly news, not silly news, but no, people, we don't need barriers to prevent people from collecting. We need things to encourage people to collect, and this ain't one of them. So it's going to be an interesting side. My wife has a lot of Victorian era jewelry, jewelry during the Victorian era that was made out of ivory, and so I get a little nervous, about her wearing it. I don't want some Fish and Wildlife guy to come up to her and throw in the clink, and handicap her because he saw her at a charity event wearing ivory jewelry, but who knows? That
raises a good question. These rules don't say anything about wearing ivory or displaying it in your home,
but the rules
apply about selling it, right?
No, the rule applies to owners of ivory. The Fish and Wildlife Commission is whether you own it or not. Okay, it's not just the seller, it's the owner. The FTC ruling applies to selling it.
Okay, that's where I was confused.
Yeah, so well, you're confused. I read the two articles and I'm totally confused. And that's where I think we are going to really, there are going to be a number of test cases, unfortunately, about all this. But moving on. Hey, I got a pair of interesting table lamps. Now, you never heard of Bangs, Texas, right? It's not like Tombstone, Arizona. Or no, where is Tombstone? Is Tombstone in Arizona or up in the Badlands?
Tombstone is in Arizona.
It's Arizona, right?
I think of Deadwood up in the Badlands.
Yes, that's right, Deadwood. Well, this is Bangs, Texas. And I got a pair of lamps, a pair of 1950s, 60s table lamps that somebody sent in. And here they are. And they were marked Kron, Kron. And, you know, having grown, people always say, how do you know so much about this stuff, Harry? And I say, what do you mean, how do I know? I saw this stuff at my aunts and uncles' houses. I saw this stuff in department stores. Come on, this is not my childhood. This is my young adulthood here, this type of stuff. But anyway, here they are. And we'll go on and look at the single picture. But and then one more, and then we'll see the marking on the bottom there. I think you can see it pretty clearly. KRON registered copyright. Okay, let's go back to the first picture there where we had the pair of them. Now, one of the things is, you know, I also grew up in the era of the end table, where you had matching end table lamps, and that's clearly what these are. The other thing was that this was the great era of the TV lamp, too. This was when you had your television sets in the 40s and 50s, and you were not supposed to watch them in the dark room. It would ruin your eyes, and so I remember my mother say, turn the lights on, you're going to ruin your eyes. And so companies all over the place created television lamps, that low wattage lamps that you would put up on your TV and keep a little glow. Well, these lamps, these Kron lamps kept showing up, and finally, there were all kinds of rumors. Where were they made? Were they made in Illinois? Where they were made? And a young gentleman named Mark Stevens decided to put his wife in the car and go to Bangs, Texas, because a couple of them were marked on the bottom, Bang, Texas. And I have to tell you what, this is, again, another thing where these guys should get PhDs for their research. They do better research than most of the people who write theses on the amount of toilet paper in a university bathroom. But anyway, he went down to Bang, Texas, and sure enough, located a company called Texans Incorporated, a lamp company organized in the 1950s by, strangely enough, someone named Kron, K-R-O-H-N. Let's see if I have it here. Howard Kron worked for Potteries, and then he came there, and then he and a partner, Richard Gunther, you'll find some of them with his initials on them as well, created a lamp business, largely to make TV lamps. But they also made table lamps. Well, I'm going to tell you what. This fellow, Mark Stevens, and a friend, David Cole, C-O-L-E, created a website called TexansInc.com, www.texansinc.com. And, you know, this is going to be my hats off to one of the best websites I've seen on any company in my life. These guys have just gone bananas with this. And they have a website that has a history of the company, www.texansinc.com. You got it there? Yep. They have history of the company, 71 fire, the rebuilding of the plant. They have a complete section on, there you are, table lamps, TV lamps, land and team employees. Now you can click, for example, on the table lamps section there, if you would please. There you go. And bada bada boom, as they say, look at that, up come table lamps. Now, the fun thing about this, there are 4 pages of these things, and there you can see one that could very well have been a TV lamp, too, with that horse and panther there. But the thing about it is that this lamp, the pair of lamps this guy has, aren't on their site. So the first thing we want this guy to do is email these guys and send them pictures of your lamp, because, man, if any lamps sing 1950s, 60s, the lamps on these things do. I mean, this is like a trip back nostalgia land, isn't it? Look at that
certainly is. I remember these from my grandparents' house.
Yeah, I remember some of these that look like limited edition whiskey bottles too. It had stamps on them. But anyway, no, they're fabulous, aren't they?
They're great.
Yeah, and you know, if you went back to the TV lamps, you'd see a lot more of the stuff you recognize. But this company, you know, because of one guy, or well, the efforts of these 2 guys, they are just fabulous. The information is just exquisite. I mean, look at that. Look at those lamps. They're just great. And I'm just thrilled with them. Well, the pair of table lamps is worth about $65, $85 the pair, maybe a little bit more. There's a shade on them, and I don't know if that's a period shade or not. And then they're quite large too. The email that that came in with these lamps suggested they were like about 24 plus inches high. But I have to tell you, I really love these lamps. And in fact, I'm going to try to get the gentleman who did the website up on my radio show, What You Got, talk to him about these Kron lamps, because I think they're really fabulous. But this is one of those things, too, where now that we know all this information, could they be worth a little bit more? Yep, they could be. But they also raise another interesting question. What are they worth with or without shades? Now, normally I would say you discount the shade value because, as you can look at the one on the right, it looks pretty beat up. But you know, the people will factor in when they're thinking about what they're willing to pay, what a new shade's going to cost. But there are period lamps, especially these end table. Yeah, see, it's all stained and so forth. I mean, you know, this shade's got to go. So you're eventually buying the lamp standard and the mantle without the shade. But there were during this period some lamps, especially Asian theme lamps, that had a kind of pagoda-like shade, and if that shade is missing, the value is impacted. But I still like the value for the pair somewhere between $85 and $100. And even though they are not, you know, the animals and this other stuff that's so typical, I just think they're neat. And so I vote for them because they're neat. And there you go with that one. Okay.
That's good. Well, let's take a moment here, Harry, and talk about how to get your items to us so we can talk about them.
Yes. Well, not only just their items, but also if they have a question about what we're doing here or how the antique trade works or whatever, something they'd like me to pontificate on, you can send your photographs and or your questions to community@worthpoint.com. Now, this is an email address, right?
Yes.
Community@worthpoint.com. Okay, so that's what we want to do with that, and we hope, and you know, I'm using some of the questions that spill over from my radio show, and I don't have any problem doing that, but we'd like to get some questions from our WorthPoint readers as well. Now, speaking of WorthPoint, we got something to share with we have two things we want to share with our viewers, listeners, whatever, however they're dealing with this, and that is, first of all, you're finally getting the marks thing up and going.
That's right. We are now have the MAPS visual recognition beta testing. So MAPS is our marks, autographs, patterns, and symbols library, and we're beta testing a new program that will allow you to take a photograph of a mark and then upload it into our system, and if we have it in the system, it'll take you right to that page. So I'm going to see if I can get to that here. Hold on.
Yes. Listen, I'm confused. What does a beta test mean?
That means we're trying to see if it works the way we want it to work.
So when people try to take part in a beta test, be a little patient, is what you're saying, right?
That's right, because we are tracking we're tracking the entries to see if they work or not, and fine-tuning to see how it all comes together. So this is the WorthPoint homepage, www.worthpoint.com, and down here it says click here to try our new beta visual search for maps. So we're going to click here, and it'll take us to this page that explains how to use it. It's very simple. You have a photograph of your mark, and I have one here prepared, so I'm going to take it. It's just a JPEG. I'm going to drag it out of the folder and into the box, and then I'm going to hit Start Search, and it has a match. So it's the Royal Battelle, I guess that's how you say it, from the
Royal somebody or other.
Yeah. It's a German mark, and this is the information we have about it right now. So it says this mark was used on ceramics, and the company is Königlich Porzellanfabrik.
I'm not sending you to Germany.
Yes.
I made an executive decision here, Greg.
I need to know how to speak German to be able to talk about the marks.
Well, so, okay. But boy, that's pretty easy.
It is. Now I've tried to use this with some other marks, and it didn't work. So it's really hit or miss right now. We really have to fine tune it. But if you want to help us out, take some pictures of marks, or if you have pictures of marks that are JPEG files, please visit the site and upload it, and we'll see what kind of information that might come up.
Well,
and like I said, we are tracking on the backside each mark, so we can see what it looks like and why it didn't work or why it did.
Yeah, and just like my remark earlier to the gentleman that owned those table lamps, the Kron table lamps, send pictures to the guys that have this site. They'll put them up there. I mean, that's what this whole purpose of this is. The age of the printed reference books is rapidly declining. It breaks my heart, to be honest with you. I mean, I still use my library extensively to identify stuff, but the truth is that we're going to have to rely, well, we're not going to have to, we are going to rely more and more in the future on the internet, and getting these mark issues right and getting this stuff out there. Look, you can't, no mark book is going to have every mark in it. I mean, it's just impossible. I mean, I get frustrated sometimes when I go into a mark book, and we had, for example, we talked about some pottery the other week, and the woman had a mark called Miller & Company 318. Well, I looked at every reference books I had, and I didn't find that specific mark, but I did find plenty of Miller & Company marks. And so that's the kind of thing where she should really submit that to WorthPoint. We've got another object to take a look at today, which is kind of fun for me. Let's deal with the Rodgers and Hammerstein book. I got an email in from a person, and they have a 1942 Rodgers and Hammerstein book printed by Random House, which is essentially the text of the Oklahoma from 1942. And if you look at the back, and sometimes we have to deal with the fact that people don't always have the best cameras, and it's hard to read things, but we were able to blow that up and see that Random House had a series of books relating to plays and movies, and you could order them, and there you could see what the price was. Well, normally when I'm trying to research a book like this, I'd go to abebooks.com, which is very, very common, abebooks.com, and look at this. And so I did. And there were two, Greg. And so guess what the prices were? One was $15 and the other one was $120.
Right, so we split the difference, right?
What do we know here? Well, we know that the price maybe is somewhere between $15 and $120. But then again, the $15 one didn't sell. So maybe the price is below $15. Actually, in fairness, the $15 one did not have the dust jacket, and I assure you that's not a $100 dust jacket. But I think it does. But there becomes a question that I wanted to deal with. What is the value of a dust jacket? What does the value of a dust jacket add to the value of the book? Well, this dust jacket is a piece of art in itself, really. And so my guess is that you're going to talk about it adding at least 20-25% more to the book if it's in really good shape. Now, you can see at the bottom of this photo that it's a little scuffed and so forth and whatever. But, if the book is clean and it has no foxing whatsoever, if the book's clean, it has no foxing whatsoever, and it's got some wonderful pictures inside as well, because I went up and did some research work on it. I think you're looking conservatively at, well, somewhere between $30 and maybe $35. Now, 120 is ludicrous. But then again, we know from the past that people throw just dumb prices up there on all these things, and as long as they're willing to pay to keep the thing listed at that, what does Abe Books care? What does Amazon not care, which owns Abe Books? They'll just collect the money and let it sit up there forever. But it's a fun book. At first, I thought it was something that you may have bought if you went to see the musical. You go to a play in New York or Chicago or some of these big cities, there's always a souvenir book, not a play book. But this one has the whole script in there, and so I'm not as sure that this would have been sold at the musical or not. I mean, come on, the thing's in English. You don't have to worry about following the words in there. But it's just a fun, nice little book. The other thing, too, that's kind of fun for me is do the math, gang. 1942, right? Now it's 1912. That's 70 years ago. plus 5, 2017, this book will be 75 years old. Has it been 75 years since Oklahoma was on the Broadway stage for the first time? Well, almost. So it's kind of fun, brings back a lot of nostalgic memories, but again, it shows you've got, when you look at value in this, you have, okay, the person that collects musical stuff, the person who collects Oklahoma stuff, cowboy theme collector, because it's got a kind of a cowboy thing, Rodgers and Hammerstein collectors. I also think, for someone that collects lithography art or lithography book cover art, this is a great little piece. So you've got 5 to 10 potential buyers in this thing, between 5 and 10 potential buyers in this thing, not each of which will pay the same price, but they'll all be somewhere in that range. So I just happen to like it for 25, 35 bucks, really, on all of this. By the way, got another new something happening at WorthPoint. You're having a contest.
That's right. We are offering it's a sweepstakes. The grand prize is a trip to France for the here comes my butchering of another language again. La Grande Batterie de Lille, which is basically the largest flea market in Europe, in Lille, France.
Hey, and by the way, a better deal than going to the Parisian flea markets, which I've been to. Those are just high-end antique shows with ridiculous prices. Save your time and money in terms of that one. But here we go with this one. This one, first of all, south of France, great place to go. It does look like they're selling a lot of wine there, but you could have a glass or two before or after your visit.
No, I'm sure. Well, the sweepstakes, the deal is you have to go with Will Seipel, WorthPoint CEO and founder.
Well, I don't know if I enter the contest yet. No.
No, Will's great to travel with.
Will's a great guy to travel with. I've had some adventures with Will, and I will continue to have adventures with Will as I work with WorthPoint. Now, how do you enter this contest, or what it's all about? How do you sign up?
Well, you have 15 days left to sign up, and the easiest way to find the link is to go to the WorthPoint Facebook page. The URL for this actual entry is sort of convoluted because of the way we had to set it up. But if you go to WorthPoint Facebook page, you will find the link. You click through, and you enter by clicking through. I guess my cookies are disabled right now, so I can't show you that.
That's a story of life. Your cookie should always be disabled.
Too many cookies.
That's it.
That's it. So, yeah, go in there, enter as many times as you want. I think there's a limit of 1 per day, but you can definitely get in there, and the lucky winner gets to go to France and maybe buy something that we can talk about later.
Hey, we can. Well, we'll take some pictures at least and let us look. I have not been to that flea market, so maybe I'll put that on my my wish list. Speaking of wish list, I've got my Institute for the Study of Antiques and Collectibles coming up here in July. Now, it's getting close. It starts July 11th through the 16th. There are 3 two-day courses. The 11th and 12th is a 2-day course on researching antiques and collectibles. The 13th and 14th is a 2-day course on paintings, watercolors, and prints. And the 15th and 16th, toys, games, and puzzles. You can get information about signing up for the courses. The Institute, they're going to be held in Lansing, Michigan, in Old Town at Barb Jersey's The Gallery. I was over there. She just opened it last weekend. Had a very successful first estate sale there in the building. Just go up to the Institute for the Study of Antique Collectibles and click on that. And then the registration for information about the courses and the registration information and the form will all be up there. Hope we'll see some of you out here. I promise you it'll be a heck of a learning experience. Greg, you were there last year.
That's right. I loved it. It was almost too much information or at least for me.
Don't say that.
But, well, I've got the folders. It's all the good information there, and you come home with
a lot of trouble to hand out detailed outlines so everybody can take advantage of it. Now, again, I want to put one final plug in. We'd like to be talking about things you would like us to talk about and talking about things that you own. So we have this address, community@worthpoint.com. Community@worthpoint.com. You can send us a question there and whatever. Also, if you send a question into the newsletter. By the way, Craig, the new newsletter's out, right?
Yes, it came out last Thursday.
Yep, you can sign
We're
up.
on every 2 weeks now for the newsletter.
Right, you can sign up for that. Go up to articles and blogs on the WorthPoint homepage, and then scroll down to articles, and then off to the left will be a way to sign up for that. It's free. You don't have to be a WorthPoint member necessarily. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you sign up for that. Well, we'll be back next week at the same time. Normally we do these Tuesdays at 2 o'clock. You can go to WorthPoint, and you can go to YouTube and watch us record them live. We do have a chat box there, and theoretically you can send us. So if Greg and I chat back and forth, we did hear from one of our viewers that you have to kind of sign off of the sound to do it, but we can always come back and find us again. But anyway, you have a great week, Craig. Talk to you next week, Tuesday, June 28th at 2 o'clock.
That's right. Okay, Harry. Well, we'll see you next time. And until then, happy collecting, huh?